Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Today's story is about June, a retired teacher and social worker who fought back against a broken system. After taking on an under-supported role teaching at-risk kids, June was fired when she stood up for herself, but instead of backing down, she took on the school, the Department of Education, and the entire system. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like and subscribe with a turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Decade-long fight for justice, a story of resilience and redemption. Every morning I take my dog to an off-lead dog park in my small town where I've gotten to know other dog walkers over time. One of my good friends at the park is June, who's around 75 to 80 years old. We've spent a lot of time chatting, and she recently shared a remarkable story with me from about 25 years ago or more. Back then, June was a school teacher, but she was also retraining to be a social worker. She left her teaching job for 2 years to work as a social worker when her old school asked her to return and run a special class for at-risk children. These were kids aged 12 to 18 in grades 7 to 12 who'd come from backgrounds of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse. It was a casual role, meaning she didn't get paid for holidays, sick leave, or other benefits, but she was passionate about helping these children. She was assigned 6 students with an aide, but the situation quickly escalated. The class grew to 20 kids, and she had no aide to support her. Understandably, their behavior was chaotic. However, June truly believed she could make a difference. Despite the challenges, she stayed focused on her students and worked hard to help them overcome their difficulties. Over time, the stress mounted. The job was draining, and despite multiple promises from the school to make her position permanent, provide an aide, and reduce the class size, nothing changed. Eventually, after 3 years of this, June burned out. She went to the principal and demanded help, but instead of offering support, he fired her. He told her that as a casual worker, she had no rights and that she should go ahead and complain to whoever she wanted, but nothing would change. Naturally, June didn't let this go. She filed complaints with everyone: the school inspector, the union, the Department of Education, since it was a state school, and even her local member of parliament. However, she was told time and again that as a casual worker, she had no rights and that this was just the way things worked. She refused to back down and eventually took her case to the state authority that handles workplace safety. The authority took her complaint seriously. They realized that the school had violated several state policies, including those related to class sizes for special needs students, teacher aides, and providing a safe working environment. The state authority ordered the Department of Education to pay June workers' compensation while they investigated the situation further, so June began to receive regular payments every fortnight, along with the benefit she should have been entitled to all along. This meant she was now getting paid 52 weeks a year instead of the 40 weeks she'd been working before. The fallout from the investigation was significant. Several people were fired or moved on due to the violations. However, this created a strange situation for June. The investigation had led to changes in the department, but the authority closed the case, leaving the Department of Education to resolve the situation. No one seemed to know what to do with June, and she was forgotten in the shuffle of paperwork. Despite that, the department continued paying her, and she remained quiet about the whole thing. It took a decade before June was found during an employee audit, and by then she was ready to retire. They finally paid her the compensation she was owed. In the end, it worked out well for her. She'd gotten what she deserved, and it happened just as she was preparing to retire. It's a long and complicated story, but June's perseverance in the face of adversity really stands out. And it was a relief for her to finally receive the compensation she'd been owed for so long. The fact that she ended up being paid for years, forgotten in their paperwork mess, feels like the universe balancing the scales. It's a shame she had to endure so much just to get what she deserved, but it's satisfying to see her determination result in some justice. What do you think? Doesn't it make you wonder how often stories like this get buried? And our second story. The not-so-smooth operator, a vape thief's misfire. I'm in the back office prepping a return when my manager points my attention to an obviously suspicious person in our store. She was wearing a coat 3 times too big, bright red, and wasn't even that cold outside. I turned around and she's crouched down behind the backroom door looking at the vape clearance rack. The backroom door is one of those swing doors and not a real one, so I just watched her as she did this, oblivious to my presence. When she walks away from the rack, I go to the counter. I see her take a value pack of vapes we had left over for Christmas and walks to the other side of the store with it. We never saw that again. Then she walks back to the register, presses her body against the end cap, and is very loudly opening one of the vapes. It came in this plastic wrap around it, so it was extremely loud, and she's less than a foot from my face, and I'm making eye contact basically with her as she does this. She walks back and forth a bit, and while she's walking around, all the vapes are in full view in her giant coat pockets. I'm texting my manager, who's in the office watching the cameras about everything. She finally comes to the register again, purchase a $2 CBD gummy when I call her out about the vapes in her pocket and if she intends to buy those too. She starts acting innocent until my manager comes out and notices them too and is questioning her about it. She tried to say she bought them the day before, to which my boss says, "Okay, great, we can check the inventory then to see if they were purchased." She starts getting defensive about it and screaming at my boss as we prove to her that there's no way she bought those, and all three of us, another coworker being the third, saw her doing this in plain sight. She starts to walk away and we call the police as we cannot physically restrain or keep people there, and we get the license plate of the car and tell the operators that. Well, they caught her. The dumb butt also had her friend drive there, and they were oblivious to what his friend did when the cops called him. They tracked his license plate. Don't know what happened after that, but we're almost positive she went to jail or is going to because my manager requested to press charges. It's satisfying to hear that her ridiculous attempts to lie didn't work. Hopefully, pressing charges sends a clear message. What's wild is how the driver apparently had no clue. Imagine being dragged into that mess without realizing it. Good on you and your team for handling it so smoothly and not letting her walk away unchallenged. And our last story. When neighborly kindness turned into a construction catastrophe. When I first moved into my home, I thought having a neighbor who was hardly ever around would be a dream come true. How could a vacation home next door possibly cause trouble? Little did I know this seemingly ideal situation would spiral into an absolute nightmare. The neighbor, let's call him Mr. Moneybags, owns a vacation property that he visits for maybe 1 week a year. For the rest of the time, it's just construction crews and chaos. Over a year ago, he approached me about temporarily opening my chain link fence so his crew could access a tree that needed to be cut down. The tree was inaccessible from his driveway, and he assured me it would only take 2 days. 2 days, that's it, I promise, he said with an overly friendly grin. Being a good neighbor, I agreed. The 2 days turned into weeks, then months, and now over a year later, my fence is still wide open, and my property has turned into a free-for-all for his construction crews. My once functional driveway is now a crumbling mess, riddled with potholes and erosion. My car struggles to make it up and down without bottoming out. Even worse is workers have taken it upon themselves to borrow my tools and equipment without asking. One day I caught one of them walking off with my garden hose. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" I called out. We'll bring it back in a bit," the worker mumbled before disappearing. Spoiler alert, they didn't bring it back. After months of this nonsense, I finally confronted Mr. Moneybags during one of his rare visits. "Look, I've been more than patient," I began, trying to keep my composure. "You said this would only take 2 days, and it's been over a year. My driveway is ruined, my fence is destroyed, and your crew keeps taking my stuff. You need to fix this." He gave me a dismissive wave. "Oh, I'll talk to the contractor, it's no big deal." "No big deal," I snapped. "My property's falling apart because of you. Fix my driveway, replace my fence, and tell your workers to stay off my land." "Calm down," he replied with a smirk. "I'll see what I can do." Weeks passed and nothing changed. The construction crew kept using my driveway, my fence remained unusable, and my patience wore thin. I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I installed security cameras around my property to document everything. Then I contacted a lawyer and got advice on filing a formal complaint. Then I sent Mr. Moneybags a stern letter outlining my demands. Restore my driveway to its original condition, replace my chain link fence, cease all unauthorized use of my property. Not long after, the contractor, let's call her Karen, who seemed to think she owned the world, showed up unannounced, flanked by her workers. "What's with this letter?" she demanded, waving it in my face. "We have a job to do. You're holding up progress." "Progress?" I laughed bitterly. "You've destroyed my property and stolen from me. I'm done playing nice." Karen scoffed. "You realize we can finish the job faster if you stop being difficult." "This is my land," I shot back. "If you or your crew set foot here again, I'm calling the police." "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, narrowing her eyes. "Watch me." Sure enough, Karen's crew returned the next day, cutting across my driveway as if nothing had happened. This time I followed through. I called the police, filed a trespassing complaint, and handed over my security footage as evidence. When the officers arrived, Karen tried to argue. "We have permission from the owner to be here," she insisted. One of the officers turned to me. "Do they?" "No, they don't," I replied calmly, "and I have documentation to prove it." Karen's bravado faltered as the officers escorted her crew off my property. That same week, I hired my own contractor to build a new reinforced fence, complete with a lockable gate. As they worked, Mr. Moneybags came by, looking sheepish. "Listen, about all this," he began. "Save it," I interrupted. "You had your chance." The new fence went up, the driveway repairs were completed, and the construction crew was forced to find another way to access his property. As for Mr. Moneybags and Karen, they've stayed far away from me ever since. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness, because once you give an inch, they'll take a mile. And probably your garden hose, too. Good on you for standing your ground. It's wild how some people see kindness as an open invitation to steamroll others, a 2-day favor turning into over a year of chaos. That's beyond disrespectful. And Mr. Moneybags brushing it off like it's a minor inconvenience? Infuriating. The fact that Karen doubled down instead of trying to resolve the issue says everything about their entitlement. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.